you, Vukosi. First, thank you for inviting me to talk with you this morning. It's my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you through your questions. I've prepared a pair deck presentation. It's the first time I've used it in a Zoom call, so I thought it would be a bit more interactive, and there are some slides in that presentation that allows you to give a bit of feedback to me and to share some of your thoughts. So I'm going to share my screen, but if you all go to that pair deck presentation, you should be able to see the presentation that I will show you and share on my screen. So you'll see exactly the same thing, but you'll be able to go through it with me. So I'm going to start and I will share my screen. Okay, I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Great. So this morning, I want to talk to you about a project that we started last year. And the project aim was to use machine learning to extract key metadata from legal text in Malawi. This little project was also supported by Artificial Intelligence for Development through their competition or initiative that they started last year. And it was one of the 10 African projects to receive support from them. I have two collaborators. One that I mentioned here because she worked with me on this PowerPoint is Eva Mfutso-Bengo, and she's a lecturer at the University of Malawi in the same college as myself. She's a trained lawyer. And Binar Kachule, who was one of my master students, and she works for the judiciary. So she helps with the data collection part. There's a blog link, which you can see maybe later on rather than doing the presentation, that describes a little bit some of the processes involved in this work. And we've submitted a paper. Kathleen and Vukosi encouraged us to submit a paper to this workshop, which we did, and I'm happy to say that we have a paper accepted to NNLP 2020. So I'm going to take you first through a bit of a background. So this work serves a couple of purposes. So apart from trying some of the machine learning algorithms to see how we can extract automatically or semi-automatically some of relevant information from court judgments, it also has the purpose of open justice, making text available to people, and also for legal research. So typically, a legal practitioner wants to find relevant cases, laws or statutes. Usually this is driven by specific questions that they have in mind, maybe a subject that they are interested in, maybe they want to do an overview of the law. And we are talking here about case law. For those who are not legally oriented, there are different types of legal systems. The case law is based on the law that comes from the Constitution or other laws and statutes passed by Parliament, but it's also based on precedent. That is how the law was applied in previous cases. So this is what we are talking about here, about this concept of case law. And Malawi has a case law system. And the results that they are finding out, so possibly they look into a book or they search online or they use a legal platform. We are going to talk about it later on. And then they search for what they are interested in. And they use a combination of searching by legal terms, so they have something in mind, or they use a combination of indexes or thesauruses of legal terms. And usually, especially in the West, like UK, America, and of course Europe, there is an organized system of citation and referencing. I don't know if you heard about Thomson Legal. So you've got systems like Westlaw or LexisNexis, which are paid, quite expensive systems that are available to lawyers and judges for legal research. Now in Malawi, we have a system based on case law, as I said before. The laws of Malawi, which is the body of the laws that were passed by Parliament and are available online, but they are not maintained regularly. Then there is a limited number of legal commentaries. Like I said before, when somebody is doing legal research, they rely on how the law was applied and commentaries that are put together by experts in the field. So for criminal law, there are no such legal commentaries in Malawi. And the classification of the judgment, which would be used to search for information, is quite rudimentary. And it's usually done by naming files. So if you can imagine, the High Court in Malawi has registry office or a library office. And what they do is they scan some of the judgments that the judges are passing, and then they're saved as files, as image files on a computer and shared through email to various parties, whether those are legal offices or judges themselves. So we've seen a problem here that we could work on. So what you see here at the top is Malawi Li. Now Malawi Li is a platform that is part of an open law project and is basically worldwide. There's a SAFLI for South Africa, and there's Malawi Li, and there's for Zambia, for Tanzania, for UK, and so on. So Malawi Li is a platform that makes available some of the laws in Malawi and some of the judgments. It's not a complete body of judgments. But there are some challenges there. There is an absence of content metadata, so there's very little metadata about these judgments. There are no keynotes or summaries of this judgment, which makes searching or legal research, as we described before, very challenging. And most importantly, what we were hoping to do through this project is to establish a linkage between case citations and citations to laws and statutes. And I'm going to explain what that means for section 42 in parentheses 2F. So it's referring to the exact location of the law that was used in this judgment. So really what we want is to have, in our first objective, was to extract automatically the structure of the judgment in terms of these component parts. So the header, the name of the judge, which includes the name of the judge, the court in which he was heard, the number, the year, and so on. So we would have ideally liked that to be automatic. And then we wanted to extract automatically or semi-automatically references to laws. And not only references to law, but references to other cases. I'm not sure if this one has references to, yes, you can see that if you look on page 5 of the document I shared with you, you can see there in amendments, there's a section called amendments, and you can see a references to 2 cases, Republic versus Lucius Chikobanda and Republic versus John Chikakwiwa. Now you're going to see that there are different styles in which these case citations are mentioned in the document. Okay, so going back to our presentation. Okay, so we have introduction, the body of the judgment, which can be paragraphs, or you can think complex components, facts, discussions of the law, the arguments of the law, and so on. The other thing that you might not have noticed is this distinction between direct and indirect history of the case. Now, in the document, the references that I showed you in text, like Republic versus Lucius Banda on page 5, these are indirect. So these are cases that are relevant to the specific case we are looking at, and they were mentioned by the judge in here. But if you look on the first page of the judgment, you can see there that you have in bracket something like this: being criminal case number 162 of 2009. Now this is direct history, because this case that's mentioned here is a previous case, a previous hearing of the same case. So this is an important distinction, because it's the citations in the same appellate chain, but we are going to talk about it later on, okay? Great, let's go on. What kind of metadata we want? Well, we've got two types of metadata in mind. One that can help us classify through a machine learning process these judgments, and we are going to talk about it later on. But we also want metadata that's relevant for legal research. Okay, so some of the ones that you've noticed immediately are quite obvious, like name of the plaintiff and defendant, year of decision. These are useful for legal research and also for a bit of machine learning work. Building case identifiers. This is quite a tricky one, and I'm going to talk to you about it later on. Section cited from the law. This can be used for thematic tagging. So if we know the laws that have been cited in a judgment, we can group the judgments according to themes. The case cited, again, give us a case trail, like I told you before, which is the direct history of a case, but indirect history as well, which can be used for spotting legal interpretation. And again, themes that are coming through the common law judgments. Okay, the type of decision which are relevant, again, for filtering. So you saw there that the heading of this judgment was a rule, but there's various other headings like ruling on bail, ruling on admission of evidence, and so on. Okay, I'm going to move on, but hopefully you're doing well, you're with me. I'm going to skip this one, but I can come to it later on, this slide. This is slide, can't see, of 13. But I want to ask your feedback now. How is the pace of the talk? If it's too slow, click on the red one. Okay, it's too slow for some people. Okay, I'll try and move a bit faster. Excellent, but some say it's quite okay. No problem. Great. So what did we do in this project? Well, the first job was to take all these files, these images of judgments, and to create the text equivalent of these images. Now, there are two ways in which you can do that. You can have pure text into a text file that you extract from the judgment, or you can organize them. Now, we wanted to hit kind of two things in a one. So we want to group and organize in a meaningful way this text. So we looked at the structure of the document, and while we created this corpus of files, we created XML files and text file at the same time. What did we do? We extracted the introduction. So the introduction of the judgment that you saw, it all went into separate files for every single judgment. The body of each judgment went into a separate file for each judgment. So we had the text file, but we also created XML file that contained each paragraph of the judgment. Now, in the folder that I shared with you, I will show you how these files look like. Now, the reason we wanted an XML file is because we wanted to then extract various metadata and be able to refer where that metadata is coming from. So, for example, we could say paragraph number 2 of judgment 10 contains starting from character 10 to character 50, this citation to law, or this citation to another case. All right. Why do we want a corpus? You will say, could you not just do text files? Well, we wanted, as I said before, open access to law, so we can publish this in a meaningful way that's organized and can improve access to law. We wanted to support legal research, and people have been put together corpuses for legal dictionaries, so you can create legal terminology, analyzing the terms used, legal translations, and so on. All these tasks involve semantic enhancement of legal terms, and this kind of work takes significant time. So we wanted to do it right so that we can build on it through our algorithms. So this is our first step, putting together a corpus, right?
Oh, hi, Amelia. Just
yes.
a warning. In our original time, we tried to keep to our 40 minutes. You have about 12 minutes to that.
I know,
period.
I will go really quick. Sorry for this. All right, so what you can see here is a breakdown of our cases. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but you can see for year 2010, we have 85 cases. The number of tokens, these will be words, contained in each of these years, number of paragraphs that we have, and how long the paragraphs are. So it gives you kind of indication of our text. We have about 682 judgments that we've collected for this corpus. All right, what was involved in the creation of the corpus? Well, one was cataloging the files. And there's quite a few jobs here, and I can let you read about that. Image adjustments. Lots of these images were quite noisy, had to be straightened, and so on. We had to do an OCR, but not image by image. We needed a batch OCR, and we also needed a tool that was cheap, free, if possible. So we had to split our images in one-page image, and then we did the OCR analysis. And then the last one was the text reconstruction from these images and the corpus creation. Okay. So for this activity, I want to show you how these OCR issues look like. So I'm going to go quickly through this one. If you can click on that link, we might skip this activity, but if you click on that link, you're going to see a collection of images. Now, these are all images that can give you an idea of what sort of OCR we had to do. So you will see, I'm going to skip that one. You can see that some of them have watermarks. Some of them have marks because of the scanner being dirty. Orientation, I didn't give you some bad orientation ones. The paper was folded and so on. Anyway, you give you an idea of that OCR issues. This is a kind of image that you could get. You can see that one on the left is oriented badly. The text is squint. This one has a lot of footnotes, headers, footnotes, and so on. And these are quite tricky to deal with. Okay, so we dealt with all these challenges. I'm going to skip because of course it will give me a row if I'm not on time. I don't know how you're feeling, but you can give me some responses. Hopefully you're feeling all very happy during this presentation. Excellent. Okay, so after doing all of that processing, time consuming, and we've learned a lot of things, and we went back, actually we repeated this process twice because we learned so much through each pass through these files. We got a corpus that we are ready to analyze, and we've used a sketch engine. I don't know if you are familiar with that, which is a very good tool for analyzing corpuses. So after you have the text organized, you can load it into this tool, and it can help you understand your text from linguistic side. So you can see there that we can look and analyze our text with respect to part of speech, the frequencies in which these occur. Okay, also gives us an idea of the lexical variation of the text that you are looking for, and this is quite useful. I'm going to skip this slide now. It also allows you to analyze the text in terms of the most frequent verbs used. Now, a lot of the things that we are looking for, especially for classification and topic extraction, is terms that have legal meaning and legal weight. So you can see there that some of the verbs are quite general, of course, because they are verbs. But if you look at the nouns, 20 most frequent nouns are legal terms, okay? And the other useful thing you can do with Sketch Engine, you can compare with other corpuses. You can compare the kind of language that's used in your corpus with other ones, okay? It also allows you to do what's called a Collocate analysis. This one allows you to see which words occur together most frequently. Now, this is quite useful for extracting topics, because a lot of the machine learning algorithms work on bag of words and work on n-grams. So it tells you which words are together, and then some of the topics are identified using that, be like clusters in your text. This is quite a useful one because it gives you an idea of what's in your text. So you can see there that we looked at modifiers of the word criminal. And you can see which are the modifiers that occur collocated with this in our text, and it gives you an idea of the strength of the collocation. The other useful thing you can do with Sketch Engine is try to look at collocation, not between words, but between references to laws and cases and words. And that's important for classification purposes. Okay. So what we did from our text, what we wanted to do from our text is to use a so the first part was creating the corpus and splitting the judgments in component parts. And those are structural components, as I said before: introduction, body, paragraphs, and so on. Now, the second job we wanted to do is to extract annotations to laws and cases. So how to do this? Well, one, you can try and do a supervised approach in which you have a training set that you're using, but how to create that is really tricky. So you have to create first your training set. So what we did for that, we used Spacey, and a combination of Spacey machine learning algorithms and an information extraction pattern that we developed to work with Spacey. So what we did then is we created this kind of files. And you can see here in the files, you'll have on each line the text and then the annotation. So the annotation gives you, in the examples, this is a law citation, and it starts in character 65, finishes at character 94 of the text, and so on. You're familiar with that, so I'll skip. And we did the same for case annotations, but case annotations were quite tricky because they have two components. One is the case name. Okay, so you can see there, Republic versus Lungu is the case name. And then further on, you're going to see the actual citation. So you have like the year in brackets, the volume, this is the Malawi Law Report, MLR, and the pages at which the case is contained. Now this is for a case that appears in the law report, but there are cases that are unpublished. So for cases that are unpublished, you have a different format. So you have something like the name of the case, Republic versus Sinus Pasipanadia, and so on. And then you have a different kind of, you have the criminal case, the type of case, the number, and the year. And so on. So we've generated some of these examples to use for our supervised approach. Great. I'm going to skip that one. So this is what we use, Spacey. Some of you have used Spacey before, so it's a Python library. It's very flexible, but it does take a lot of time to get it right, especially when you have complicated text. And we also wanted to use Spacey to test some of the name entity extraction on our text. And I'm not talking a lot about this in our presentation. There's a lot to say there. So what did we do? We've used Spacey, and you can see here on the second column. Okay, so on the first column, you have the judgments grouped by year. On the second column, you have the Spacey pure Spacey extraction of law, law, Spacey has an entity called law. So Spacey can extract some of these citations to law that we are interested in. But you can see there that it can only extract a few of them. So what we did on the third column, we enhanced Spacey using an entity ruler. Now this exists in Spacey, you can customize that as you want. So we use the entity ruler and the phrase matcher in Spacey to extract more. And you can see there that for 2010, for example, from 507 straight with Spacey, we managed to extract more than double using an enhanced approach. But of course, a lot of these entities that are extracted, if you can imagine, are just pieces. So sometimes Spacey only extracts the first part of a citation. So section 42. But you're actually interested to know where is that section. So you want the full citation, which is section 42 of the Constitution, for example. So this is where we had to employ a merger, because we had to merge the entities that were extracted into full ones. Okay. Good, so I wanted to show you these files. I think this is quite important for you to see. So we are on slide 32 of the presentation. If you go to that Google Drive, I have put a folder called worked example. Now in the worked example, what you're going to see is the judgment that we are looking at and the XML file that I was telling you about that we created that extracts the first part of the judgment, which is the introduction and the body with paragraphs. And the other file that you have is the citations to law that were extracted from that judgment. So have a look at that for the next 1 minute or so. But you can look through that while I talk, okay, because quite a lot of things to say. But this is what we've done. So basically we have this for every single judgment in our corpus. Yeah.
But 5-minute warning, Amelia. No, just extend it a little bit.
Okay,
So yeah.
I'm going to go now to the second part. So I hope I gave you a flavor of what we did in the first part. So we created a corpus of judgment, and by doing that, we extracted the main structural components from the judgment. Then we created a tool, an automatic tool for creating a training set. So we've actually extracted some of this references to law citation and case citation from those judgments, and we have put them in separate files, annotations to each judgment. But that takes us to the next aspect of our project, the classification. What did we want? Well, we want to classify this criminal judgment according to a meaningful classification, and we looked at several, but we chose this one. This is called the International Classification for Crimes that, for the purposes of crime statistics. And you can see that it has 11 levels. Each level refers to a type of judgment. So the first one, acts leading to death or intending to cause death. And these are homicide cases, and so on. And then you can see number 4, acts against property involving violence, and so on. So you've got all this classification that we want for legal research for our judgments. Okay, now how to do that? Well, it's quite tricky. Why? Because some of these classifications are too close to each other. I mean, some are far apart. For example, number 1 and number 7. Number 1 is homicide, and number 7 is acts involving fraud and deception and corruption. These are very different, so they'll probably use different keywords. So we've kind of studied our text to see what we can do. So you can have a keyword-driven approach. So you have to extract, obviously, and put this metadata onto the judgment. So you can see there that you want, for classification number 5, keywords that refer to theft or goods being stolen and so on. Number 7 refers to selling stolen goods and so on. So keywords, classification 8, 3 and 2 of the ICCS all refer to a kind of prostitution. This has a keyword prostitution in them, but of course is used in different ways. So we are looking not just to extract individual words, keywords, but we are looking at collocation, like I've described in the previous slides. Okay, so you can have a linguistic-based categorization, all right? So you have to do that with the aim of differentiating. Okay, I'm going to skip on this because we don't have much time. Okay, there are lots of overlaps that you have to take into account. And it's quite tricky to know how to then do that with the combination of keywords. So for example, ICCS 2, ICCS 5, they all overlap somewhere into ICCS 4 that you see there, because it acts against property, acts against person, but you can have both, right? All right. The other thing that we need to bear in mind, you can have a partial match, a double match. So it's not straightforward. Okay, and this is another example of overlaps. I'm going to skip this slide. All right, again, you have ICC, the first category, assault plus death, and robbery plus death are both homicide, under the homicide, and how to deal with dominant categories. Okay, so we've looked into that. I'm going to skip now to slide 44. So what did we do for this classification? When one, we had to understand how to use the keywords in the sense I've described, because you don't just need keywords to identify the presence of something, but you want to distinguish the way the words are used. As you saw, there are lots of overlaps in there. So we've done a manual classification of our cases, and we wrote down, these were manually annotated by the legal expert in our team. So we went through the 2019 cases and we manually annotated with the keywords that are relevant for the classification that we have in mind. And this is an example that you have of the cases that we've classified. And the other thing we wanted to write down is the statutes that were used in each judgment, because a lot of them are dominant statutes or references to laws, which made a difference into how these cases were classified and how the judgment was pronounced by the judge. Okay, so, but in order to map into the classification, we had to do an extra step. So it became a little bit more complicated because we had to map the actual penal code or the statutes and the laws into the classification, the ICCS classification. That's quite interesting work in itself. And you can see here the sections that refer to intentional homicide. Now, for those that are machine learning experts in the audience, you immediately realize that you can use the annotations with case citations and the annotation to laws for clustering and for themes that run through, and for the classification itself, of course. You can see an example there. So this is our work in progress at the moment. So we need to develop a methodology for building these descriptors that allows us to classify and to distinguish between different categories. And I'm going to skip this slide. Okay. Now, in terms of tools, well, where are we now? So we have the corpus. We've extracted the components of the corpus that we can now use. We've extracted citation references to laws and to other cases, so we can hyperlink the documents. We are in the process of doing that, so we can hyperlink these documents to laws and other cases, you know, and so on. But now in terms of classification, as you can see, I'm sorry to go so quickly, it's quite complex. So we are still working on this descriptor building methodology that you see here. And we need to manually annotate the judgment still. So we thought of using an annotation tool, and I just wanted to say this is quite a good tool. I don't know if you've used it before. It's called Docano, and you can customize it the way you like. So this is what we are doing at the moment. That's like the next stage in the process, to add some of these legal annotations to our documents. Now this image at the end gives you an idea of the XML format of our files. By the way, this image is not of the final product, so we were still working on it. But you can see there the components of the files that come through in the TE annotation. This is text initiative, text encoding initiative that we've used. And you can see where the body starts here. So you've got the front matter, which belongs to the judgment itself. And then you have the body, and each paragraph appears as it is in the judgment. So this is where we are. Work in progress. We are working on the classification and on the case citator. And I can explain what that means if people want to ask a question on that. But I think I should stop here, Vukosi. Am I on time?
Thanks, Amelia. Yeah, I think yes, because we had 50 minutes or almost or so. So I'll just ask maybe then for questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. And hopefully everybody got the gist of, I think, the work on there. And it's a lot of work. I think very appreciative of the detail that you've gone through in this part. And also, I think for people to understand that annotation in this space is also not trivial. Kind of in a way, it's a process, and it has to be done very kind of skillfully and slowly so that you can get it right and that's okay. So I think questions, I think you can put them in the chat, and then the other option, also please raise your hand and then I can put you on. I think we have a question from Jacob Odada. I'll just unmute him and then you can go ahead, Jacob.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation, Amelia. Okay, now mine is just on 2 points. One is I don't know why, if you ever considered using Akumantoso for your legal XML standard, because Akumantoso is an OS's legal XML standard, and it allows for us to share legal information across many jurisdictions. So I would expect that just for moving forward so that we can benefit from your work more, you'd consider having it in a Akumantoso standard for us. Secondly, I wanted to find out, since Malawi uses Commonwealth law, it uses Commonwealth law. I wanted to find out, did you consider using like data from, let me say, other Commonwealth countries that are already available in machine readable format to generate your training set? So because there are other Commonwealth countries like Mauritius, I think, which already have some of their laws are available in machine readable format. So did you consider using it as to generate your training data? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. That's great. Yeah, so we have looked at that, the Akumantoso that you talk about, and I think it will be not difficult to take our format to that because it's XML based. I mean, okay, it might be using different tags, but you can easily move to that. Now, one thing to say here, we were not familiar with a lot of these encodings, and we've learned as we were going to the process. The other thing that we wanted is to maintain a certain separation between the data that the data set that we are creating and the purpose for which is being used. That's why we thought, let's go for a general approach, like the TAY approach, because we can always move on to something more complex, you know, later on. So initially, when we started this project, we had the machine learning component in mind more, but then it became, we kind of drew to the data as we were analyzing it. So we've discovered so many different things, including the encoding that you mentioned, which was used a lot for the Greek legal text. The other question that you said, I think it's a really good point that you've made. Really like that one, but is there such a set? I mean, we really didn't find a lot. I mean, if you could send me some of that annotated text, it would be useful. And we could definitely compare and integrate it to what we have.
Okay, thank you for that. Lamont?
Thank you, Amelia, for the talk and even extending to sharing some of your findings thus far. the sections that you showed us in some of those examples, for instance, the introduction and then the law, etc., to what extent was identifying the section, so the beginning of the section, the end of the section, important for your research and creating the corpus? And if you did attempt that, then what did you find worked best to identify the headings and the subheadings?
Okay, well, we initially didn't necessarily want to extract okay, so what we wanted is to have enough metadata that allows us to catalog these judgments. This comes to the idea of the citator, because at the moment the information is sparse. So what ideally you want, a lot of these tools like LexisNexis and Westlaw, they have what's called the case citator, but every single case is present in a standard format and allows you to then hyperlink your case. So in the initial stage, what we wanted is to extract that information from our judgments with the purpose of creating that citator. Because a lot of I was talking about the history of a case. You know, it's important to trace the direct history of the case and then obviously the indirect history of the case, but you can't do that without a citator. And we don't have that for the Malawi judgment. So that was our main concern initially. But then I hope I understand your question well. Now, in terms of the structural components of the judgment, i.e. the facts, you know, like the way the judge presents a judgment, where he says, okay, presents some judges put the actual judgment at the beginning, and then you have facts, discussion of the law, and so on. We didn't actually take that into account very much, but it was an interesting, for our legal, if you can imagine, we are like a multidisciplinary team, where I'm coming with the computer science approach, and then you have the legal people, and they know this is important to us. So then we looked at that, but only indirectly at this point.
All right, we're going to put Sam Masikini.
Hello, thank you, Madam Amelia. My question is actually, I'm assuming that the legal text should have involved some local terminologies such as names in the local languages. So considering you're using the Spacey too, I don't know what kind of problems were you faced with, especially in classifying or extracting entities involving local terminologies in the text themselves? Any challenges, and how did you or your team come to solve those challenges as well? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so there's, okay, just to give you, before I answer your question, I just wanted to also come on this one. So this is not, we see our work as complementary to what there is. So we are not wanting to replace any platform. The need of the work came from the practice of the people on the ground. So at the moment, there is a system in which these judgments are passed on from the judiciary to the other stakeholders. And that process is where we come into play. So at the moment, there isn't such a thing that allows linking between laws and statutes. And there isn't such a thing as classifying them for the legal research. And I said before, in terms of creating legal commentaries. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. So what we see our work is as a complement to that, and maybe a scope to see how we can create this automatic tool. Now coming to, so that's for Jacob, because I see the messages, he says, so we've actually looked at all these platforms. So we want to work and complement, not, I mean, what they're doing is excellent and it helps us. But now coming back to your question, Sam, so yes, I think so. I think names were an issue because a lot of the Bantu names or the names used in Malawi were not recognized as names. But there were other issues, you know, there were a lot of names in Malawi have a combination of an English name and let's say like a Bantu name. And this is where you could have the English name taken into account as an English name, but not the other one. You can deal with that around that. But there's also cases when people are called names that are words that mean something, you know. So we found that issue as well. So I think there is definitely a need to have models trained on Bantu names. I mean, doing this work, we've also looked into creating a database of names, Bantu names.
Okay, the last question we'll take for today will be Carol.
Hi, Amelia. Thank you for a great presentation. I just have two questions. One with regards to the extracting. Were you guys able to extract the sentencings of the cases? And if so, how did you go about it? And then the second one is on the classification itself. Would you guys be doing like for cases which have multiple type of sentences like prostitution and also human trafficking? How would you go about classifying that? Would it be more of a multi-classifier, or would it just be everything on its own line? Or yes, yeah, or
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Yeah, so the sentencing, we looked at that. We haven't finalized anything, but a lot of the judgments have the sentence in the first sentence. Some of them, they summarize, but not all. It's not uniform. And some of the judgment have the judgment at the end, but it's written in legal terminology. So for example, you can have, you know, the case has been upheld or whatever, you know, but you need to explain what that means. But we haven't done work on that. I mean, there's a lot of scope to use this text for different type of analysis, like the one you mentioned. And on the second question, the ICCS classification is meant to be, you are meant to classify a judgment according to one classification. And actually was designed to be a classification of crime for policing, you know, for police statistics. It wasn't designed to be a classification for criminal judgment. But having looked around to see what there is, we thought this would be useful. That's how we settled with it. But yes, you're right. I think some judgment in legal terms, they will fit under more than one classification, but you have to choose the dominant one. So this is where our work on some of the slides were talking about choosing that kind of descriptors that allows you to choose the dominant category.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Amelia, for your talk today and you're taking your time. Thanks everybody also for coming in early, kind of in the morning to join in on the seminar series. On there's a lot to kind of take in here. We'll put up the video. Unfortunately, it will be disjointed because my connection seemed to die for some reason and it didn't want to come back on. Just FYI, the next talk actually won't be a talk, it will be a workshop on scientific writing. So it will be first be open, which hoping to locally in Southern Africa. In that space, it will be hosted by Prof. Elaine from Boston Health on there. So it won't have, like, you know, the slots won't be as big as this, so they'll be slightly smaller. You will get some information about it, but we're just trying to work out that the RSVPs, I think it'll be later in the afternoon African time, kind of instead of early in the morning, but it will be in 2 weeks time. We're trying to keep, so we do have, I've posted in the chat a blog post on Amelia's talk, just explaining a couple of things on there, just providing some information. The YouTube video, when it becomes available, will be uploaded on there and you'll have access to it. Right now, her slides and her example folder, as well as some other notes are very on there. There's also a link where you can give feedback on the seminars and also give ideas and also obviously suggest other speakers. The plan is to completely run this every 2 weeks until the rest of, like, the end of the year. So we are looking kind of for a diverse set of people who can come in and really look at how we're using data science in society. Amelia's work being one example, like we're trying to actually deal with connecting two parts of society that we can't, and just being able to analyze these documents is very important, because we can then better understand how legal systems work in a way that is furthermore of just trust the gods, but you can actually then analyze and be able to give some insight on that part. Lastly, as normal, we do run a data science newsletter. The next publication should be out soon, next week on there, and then you can also sign up on that. So thank everybody for coming along. Thanks again to Koimas for sponsoring this and also assisting us today on this one. So we're just over five minutes over, so it's not too bad. Thanks, Amelia. Everybody have some coffee and kick off the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.